Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Awesome in Seattle podcast. This is your host, Christian Nossum of the Awesome Nossum Group at Wilson Realty. We are a group of Seattle area real estate agents. Now, today, we are talking all about home inspections. And I have a special guest with me, an actual home inspector.
That's me.
Brennan Coyle from Workhorse Home Inspections. There you go. I said it right.
Nailed it. First try.
Nailed it. Brennan is a home inspector here in the Seattle area, general Seattle area, and we use him to inspect homes. It's a pretty straightforward process, but we're going to go all about that and really dive deep. And I got some good questions, including a really, really funny one, which is the weirdest thing he's ever seen, which he told me just a minute ago, and it's pretty crazy. So you definitely want to stick around till the end for that, because it's going to be the last question I ask. So before we get started, I have to get on my soapbox and say this to all of those buyers out there. And that is one thing. Always, always, always see an inspection report before you buy a house, before you make an offer on a house, whether you're the one hiring the inspector to go out there and do it, or whether the seller is procuring an inspection and giving it to you. Always look at one before you actually buy a house. Don't buy a house without an inspection.
I couldn't agree more.
Yes, and not just because you get paid, but it's also super important for buyers to do this. You need to understand what it is you're buying and what defects there are potentially.
Yeah, and what you're willing to live with and what's kind of a deal breaker for you.
Exactly. So, Brandon, thank you so much for being here. I've been on probably a few thousand inspections at this point in my career, doing this for almost 20 years. And I always learn something from every single one. There's so much to know about houses.
I learned something on just about every inspection. There's always going to be something new, something weird. You ask yourself the question, why, a lot.
Yes.
Like, why is this happening?
And common sense just doesn't apply a lot of times.
Why did they do that?
Yes.
Yeah, occasionally there's stuff that just doesn't have answers, but usually we can get to the bottom of it.
Yes. It is funny to see what people do with their houses.
People can get a little wild. People can get a little, or maybe creative's a better
Maybe
word for
creative,
that.
yes.
They can get creative with it.
So let's go over the background of an inspector. What is it that makes an inspector certified, and how does that process work, and what all is involved?
The certification part is, I want to say, fairly straightforward. There is some schooling requirements. You have to pass some national exams, some state exams to kind of get credentialed and be licensed with the state. But I think what really separates the I just took school and I've lived a life of construction inspector is the construction background and really having some of that hands-on knowledge of how things go together.
Yeah.
And that said, the bookwork can also crumple some people. There's many people in my class that it's too much. Yeah. There's a lot of technical data in there.
Well,
so we're kind of forced to learn a little bit about a lot. It's like the primary care physician.
Yeah.
You're there to kind of assess the situation, diagnose it, and then suggest a specialist if anything's really going wrong.
Makes sense. So what all does a home inspection cover?
I want to say pretty much everything. Anything that we can get to, we'll go over the roof, the foundation, the attic, the crawl spaces, look through the electrical panel, check a bunch of outlets, kind of try and figure out what kind of wiring's in the walls. It really is all-encompassing of all the major systems of the home. We do have our limitations with what we can access. If there's stuff in the way, if it is in the wall, we can't really see it. But most of us really try and do a good job and kind of get to every little nook and cranny that we can. So you get a well-informed report at the end.
I guess a follow-up question to that would be, what is not included in an inspection that maybe people assume is?
What's not included? I think the biggest thing that I feel like is not included sometimes is the hidden stuff. Like you'll see a little bit of moisture on a wall and they'll want you to dive in deeper. And you're like, I can't, we don't own the house. It's not our house. I'm not a contractor here to fix it. So I think for me, I feel like mainly the stuff that's not covered is the really diving into like the root of a problem. Because we're not allowed to damage property.
You can't cut into walls. You can't do any of those types of things where you can only visually see what you can see, and that's what you're assessing.
Yeah, and even to that degree, some inspectors do, some inspectors don't. But even, when valves are on or off, if the water's shut off to the house, if a breaker's shut off, you want to turn it on and figure out why. But sometimes there might be a reason. You turn the water on,
and then
there's a leak that they were trying to fix. So you kind of, we have to protect ourselves a little bit, and also the property owner. So
well, and that kind of falls on your agent as well to find out, hey, just making sure, is everything on?
Yeah.
Is there for some reason the water's not on? I actually was at an inspection earlier today. Water was not on. And we knew that going in, though, so we weren't expecting to do it because there were some issues with that house, and we knew it. So
I was at one last week. It was turned off. The house had been vacant. They didn't pay the bill.
Oh wow!
And it was shut off. And there's a tag that says minimum $200 fine. I was like, does anybody want to adopt this fine so I can turn that on, or should we call somebody? But so we didn't. I just came back and re-inspected it later.
Yeah, not a huge deal.
There's usually some kind of workaround that we can figure out.
Yep. So explain to people the different type of home inspections. So for the ones that come to mind are a seller procured, a pre-inspection, and a kind of standard inspection. Do you want to explain what the differences are between those? Are there even differences?
Yeah, I mean, in some regard, they're all exactly the same. As an inspector, we go there, we do the same inspection every time, or you should. You're checking all the same stuff.
Yeah.
Really, the difference lies in, the seller procured inspection is somebody that wants to list their house. These got really popular throughout the pandemic because having inspectors and people there with COVID was not an option. So they really gained popularity through that. But that's just a way for a seller, to me, I feel like, to identify anything that they would like to fix or give everybody kind of a clean slate and the same view of the property when they're making their offers. I love to do them because they're usually quiet and peaceful.
Exactly. Yeah.
But also, I think it's a powerful tool for a seller. Then your buyer inspections, same exact inspection. For me, there's zero difference. I do the exact same thing every time. I'm just doing it for a buyer. And those are typically, people that are under contract, already love the house, looking to make an offer. They get their little contingency window, and they just want to reassure themselves there's nothing hiding that's too much.
Yeah.
And then the other one, these ones get called everything. It's a pre-inspection, it's a verbal, it's a consultation. For insurance purposes, it's a consultation.
Yes.
And it's essentially the same exact inspection, but I usually do them pre-offer. Say you're looking at a bunch of different houses, you haven't narrowed in. You want to save a little bit of money, but you want a good shakedown of the house prior to making your offer, so you kind of know where you're going to land. They go a little bit quicker because I'm not taking all the pictures and documenting everything.
You're not writing down notes or anything.
Yeah, I'm not taking all the
verbal
notes.
Yeah.
Yep. I do the same inspection, and then at the end we just do a verbal walkthrough. I point at stuff. I'm always happy to talk kind of as long as you want. I don't mind chatting with people about stuff. And then you can at least, prior to making your offer, you can at least have a good idea of anything that would be of significance to you. Like, hey, it needs a new roof. It's going to be $30,000. Okay, I know that going in. I still want to make said offer.
Yep. One thing that I forgot to bring up, but I want to bring up now, what about like sewer lines? Is that something that you inspect, or is that someone else?
I don't do it currently. That's actually a service that I'm working on training in to provide. Cool. Mostly just to be able to offer both at the same time. Because it is, I feel like your sewer line inspection or your sewer scope or whatever you want to call it is equally as important as a home inspection.
Yeah, I agree at this point, yeah.
It is a major component that it's easy for them to inspect. It goes quick.
Yeah.
And it can save you from, tens of thousands of dollars if something's gone wrong. I feel like in most cases, the reports that I see from sewer scopes, a lot of times they're good, but when they're bad, depending on where it's at, it can really become an issue. So I recommend a home inspection and a sewer scope, even though I'm not doing them currently.
Yeah. So why don't you explain what exactly a sewer scope is so people understand that difference?
Sewer scope, it's pretty straightforward.
It is. Yeah.
There's in your house, you have all your sewer lines. They come into one main line that will go under your house and out to the street and connect to your city main. You as a homeowner are responsible from your house to the city main. So they have a camera on a cable, and you stick the camera down there. It films a video, and then you can see if there's any any breaks, any offsets, if it's old terracotta pipe and it's caved in, or root intrusion, and kind of get an idea of where that line goes. So, in some cases, if it goes underneath a driveway and a patio and a rockery and a retaining wall, that's going to be substantially more expensive if there is any issues versus if it just goes through a little piece of lawn that you can easily dig up and get to for any repairs.
Or if it's 20 feet deep versus 3 feet deep.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which I've seen all.
They're all out there.
They are.
Some of them even go uphill, surprisingly.
Yeah, which is weird, but yeah.
It works.
You might need to get a little closer to the mic. I'm seeing you scoot farther away as we go.
About that.
No, it's good. All right. I think we went over how an inspection helps a buyer. Actually, I'm going to say that again because I'm going to add in like if they find stuff, what they can do. So,
how it helps a buyer?
Yeah.
Okay. This caught me off. I'm like, oh, it's not live. Like we can just
we can just stop and then just go.
All right.
My session expired. What is that talking about? All right. So, how does a home inspection help a buyer?
First and foremost, it gives you a comprehensive understanding of what you're getting into. If there is any major defects, if there's not, if, maybe it's just old systems, knob and tube wiring, galvanized plumbing, stuff like that. Just stuff that you need to know and be prepared for going into
you're going to have to budget for over the next 5, 10, 15 years.
And then now that we're back to a civilized market, I think for you, it really helps. And you guys end up with like some negotiating power or at least a little bit of leverage that I think can really help a buyer in a lot of situations.
Yeah. If the market is not competitive, I guess the difference between a pre-inspection and a more standard inspection is a pre-inspection is one that you make before you make your offer because it's a competitive situation. So you're trying to eliminate your inspection contingency when you make an offer. So you're doing it ahead of time. That way you don't have to make your offer contingent upon it. A normal inspection is when you make an offer, you have not done an inspection yet, you make the offer, and you include it's a negotiable time frame, but it's generally around 5 days-ish, 7 days-ish, 3 days sometimes if it's tight. But you have that time frame to potentially back out if you wanted to. If you find something wrong, or even if you just change your mind, you don't even have to technically get an inspection done. You can just use it as a get out of jail free card. It's kind of crazy.
It's not bad to have in your pocket.
It isn't, yeah. So that's why, though, sellers want to see that contingency removed from any offer if they're able to. But if it's at all competitive, they want to see that gone. But if it's not competitive and you're the only offer, you might be able to keep that contingency in there. And if you do find things wrong, that's where the buyer gets to negotiate with the seller. And you can say, hey, Brennan said that it needs a new roof and the electrical has some issues. And the new roof and the electrical, we think it's going to cost somewhere around, in total, $10,000. Then you can go back to the seller and try to either get them to repair it, negotiate the price down, or what I always recommend, number one, is to get a credit from the seller for that amount so that you can hire who you want to get that work done and you know they did it the right way.
I agree with that 100%. I was going to try and footnote the seller repair thing. It's a nice gesture that they would be willing to do the repair. Yeah. The unfortunate thing is in most cases, they're just trying to get it done.
Yeah.
For
they don't necessarily care how it gets done.
As long as it's done and it passes, go about your day.
Yep.
Versus when you have control over that and it can get done how you would like to do it.
Exactly.
Since you are the one buying the house.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to, it's generally more advised for you to pick who's doing the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then also if there's a warranty, sometimes those don't transfer to the next buyer. And it might only be with that one seller who had it and they only own the house for another 2 weeks. So that warranty doesn't really mean a hell of a lot.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Yeah.
Doesn't really help you out.
So if you're the one that's paying for it and you're choosing who it is and they have a warranty, now you're good. What are some of the most common things that you find during a home inspection?
The most common is, honestly, there's small defects. Yeah. It's just everyday maintenance, deferred maintenance, paint, caulking, failed some bigger-ish things like failed window seal, so you have some fogging. Yep. Which it's primarily a cosmetic thing, but that kind of stuff. And then I think second to that is just old systems. We have a lot of old homes, so there is I do have to have the talk about knob and tube wiring and galvanized plumbing and buried oil tanks. I have to go over that quite a bit. And it's
Why don't you do that right now? What is knob and tube wiring?
Say this stuff too much. Knob and tube wiring.
You can take a nap while you say it. I'm sure you can handle that.
It's the invention of electricity, basically.
Yes.
That was our first system that we used to distribute electricity.
Pretty outdated.
Inherently, that's the biggest issue. Is it's old and insurance companies don't love it.
Yep. It does. If you have knob and tube in your home, it can be difficult to get home insurance. Some insurance companies just flat out will not insure your home. Others have no problem with it. So you just have to find the one that doesn't have a problem with it.
And then the caveat I always have to try to explain is inherently it's not a bad system. It's just getting old. So it can deteriorate over time. And what really causes the problems is in the old days, we didn't need that much electricity.
Yeah.
And now we need a lot more electricity. So as we add circuits and people start tampering with it and tying into it, we didn't have enough insulation in the attic. So then we insulated our attic, but it buried this knob and tube wiring. So it can't disperse the heat. That's where it kind of becomes a safety concern or a fire concern. But I see knob and tube wiring and I don't know, 50% of the old homes, whether it's just in the walls, maybe some in the attic. And I like to let people know, as much as it is a fire safety concern, it's not like it's rampantly burning down houses every day.
No.
So we all have to live to our own degree of safety.
Yeah.
Some people can't handle it. Other people can overlook it.
You got to also realize it's probably been there for 80 to 100 years already, or 50 years, or however, whenever the house was built.
And the skill required to install that type of wiring. If you've ever seen this stuff, it looks like a pain to install. So
yes, it does.
It was like true craftsmen of the time putting this stuff in. So typically, as long as it hasn't been messed with, it was done right. And it's still doing its job.
All right, let's talk about galvanized steel pipes.
Galvanized, that's a short conversation. It's a steel pipe that...
and this is the water pipes in your house, the water that is going to the faucet.
So yeah, these are your plumbing supply lines that are providing water to all your fixtures. It was great pipe. We used it for a long period. We stopped using it mid to late 70s. And at that point, all of it is about 50 years old. And the deal with it is it's steel. So since it's steel full of water, it rusts over time. And it slowly rusts and just kind of closes up like an artery.
Smaller. Yep.
It'll start to leak. You'll start noticing it. You'll see brown or discolored water. You'll have low flow at a faucet. But the thing is with it, it's never a if I need to replace it. It's just a when.
Yeah, like you're going to replace it
at some point. It's going to fail, and you're going to need to do it. I always recommend doing it in advance. You save yourself the trouble of water damage.
Yeah, exactly.
So
a good tip that I learned from an old inspector years and years ago when I first started, he said, hey, if you want to test the water pressure and see how good it is, even if you have regular plumbing or galvanized steel or PEX or whatever, what you do is you turn on the tub, you turn on the faucet in the bathroom, and you flush the toilet. Yeah. When you flush that toilet, if all the water pressure goes and just dies off, you probably need to replumb.
They call it a flow test. Yeah. And it's just because you're demanding a lot out of the system at once. And if it can't get through that pipe, then stuff starts to trickle.
Yep.
Some bad cases, you'll know as soon as you turn the faucet on.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just a little stream.
Yep. All right. The other thing you mentioned were oil tanks. Why would there be an oil tank at a house?
Oil tanks, that was prior to using natural gas for furnaces and heating our home. If it wasn't electric, it was going to be burning fuel oil. Here in the Northwest, we decided we like to bury them a lot. They did this all over the country, but I feel like specifically in the Northwest, there's not a lot of above ground oil tanks. So they would just bury a big tank in the yard somewhere, fill it with oil.
They're like, what, 300 to 500 gallons?
Yeah, they're huge.
They're massive,
it's still operating.
Yeah.
I see oil furnaces all the time.
Yep.
I saw one the other day that was installed in 1971.
Wow.
So they do their job. The parts are simple. People still maintain them. The only issue with those is when they get abandoned, if people don't decommission it properly, where they drain the oil, fill it full of like an absorbent sand type material. It has the potential, if it's still holding 100 gallons of oil and it rusts out and leaches into the yard. If for some reason you notice it or somebody notices that there's oil in the soil, that wasn't supposed to rhyme, but it did. you can get stuck with the cleanup and the remediation of all of that, which can get
very expensive.
Yeah, extremely expensive when you start excavating soil and dealing with all that. So there is a company called Philco that takes records. They have records dating back to like 96. So if there's an oil tank, just kind of do the best homework you can. Sometimes the sellers have a decommissioning certificate.
Yep.
They used to have PLIA insurance. I don't know if that's...
I think they got rid of it, yeah. I don't know why. But
I know you can't get it anymore. But
you can transfer it if they had it before, I believe. It was transferable. Yeah.
But I was just told the other day that somebody said that stopped.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, so I need to dig into that
either. Yeah. What about rodents? Because I feel like, and tell me your experience, but I feel like 75% of the homes that are inspected have some sort of rodent activity, whether it's previous or current. Is that about as much as you're seeing it?
Yeah, I'd back you up on that figure.
And I feel like everyone is shocked by that when they realize that that's the case.
Yeah, which becomes difficult to tell people because we see it every day, and you're like, yeah, it is what it is.
I literally just bought a house with a dead rat in the attic.
It happens. They're just, I mean, we live in the Northwest. It's a tempered climate. There's tons of foliage. It's easy for them to thrive and survive.
Yeah, and they jump off the tree branches onto the roof.
Yeah, and sometimes today it was a gorgeous house, and I wasn't finding anything, and really didn't think the attic was going to be of any concern. And then got up there, and it was just a rodent house. I was like, how? There's not even big trees around, but
weird.
They'll find their way. Yeah, if there's a little hole and it's warm, they'll find their way.
A rat only needs like a dime-sized hole. And they can fit through it.
Like that. I
think that's how big their skull is, and the rest of their body can like.
There was a pest inspector that just told me, he's like, just watch the song at the end of Ratatouille, and that'll tell you everything you need to know about rodents.
Now I need to rewatch that movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in ages. But he's like, yeah, it tells you how high they jump and what they can fit through and all this stuff. So
crazy.
Yeah, I'll have to rewatch that as well.
Yeah, we'll add the clip at the end. No, I'm not. We're not going to add the clip. We don't have the rights for that. We can't do that. YouTube would shut us down. What about looking for mold or water damage or anything water related in a house? How does that work on your end as an inspector?
I mean, that's our biggest enemy here in the Northwest is moisture. We get a ton of rain. But even worse than rodents, it will really find any place to get into your home.
Yeah. And the oddest place. Sometimes the water will actually go up.
Yeah.
Like it's weird.
It'll find a way to get back down to Mother Earth for sure. Yeah. I mean, it all starts visual, that's the whole inspection starts there. But with moisture, especially, you just start looking for clues. Like, is there a little wood rot? Is there something that would lead you to think that maybe moisture is getting in there? And then if you do start to see some signs or symptoms, say on an interior wall in a basement, finished basement, hey, there's a little peeling paint down at the bottom. You can't just say this is wet, this is moisture damage. You have to kind of further evaluate it and confirm. So we use we have a thermal camera, which helps us. It just detects temperature, but if there's cold water coming in from outside, it'll show a cool spot, and it can kind of lead you to confirm it with your moisture meter. Yep. In which case, then you at least know, hey, there is a moisture problem here. Let's try and figure out why. So it's a tricky one to really track down. I mean, you can sometimes when it really gets in there, you can find the root cause quick. Other times, you have to get a contractor out to kind of start digging around. But
I mean, I've seen it where the leak was, 20, 30 feet away, and the water just followed like a beam and then dropped in some other spot. And you're like, how did it get that's crazy that it did that. Okay.
There's a leak in the ceiling here, but really it starts
it's way over there.
Feet that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of stuff happens.
It does far too frequently in our state.
Yes.
By saying that, a lot of the stuff we're talking about,
you can
the
fix
old
it.
materials, we see it a lot.
Yep.
The other stuff, I mean, the catastrophic stuff is rare.
Yes, very rare.
Most of it is fix it and forget about it. Routine maintenance.
Yep.
The odds of finding like slam dunks, tear down houses is relatively low.
Yeah. And that brings up my next question. Are there any like immediate red flags that are deal breakers for people that they should just go, whoa, nope, don't buy this house?
It's pretty rare. I mean, there are certain items that for the client could be a deal breaker.
Totally.
Just, hey,
which is different for everyone's.
Yeah, we just don't want to spend that money. We don't want to invest in this. We're looking for something that's lower maintenance.
Yep.
But as far as for me to tell somebody like you should not buy this house, it has to be pretty severe. And typically, it would be I mean, the number one thing is foundation stuff.
Yeah.
If it's a shoddy foundation or not built correctly,
or say it's on like a hillside and it's falling or something like that, where you can see movement of some sort. If you can
see the impending doom of this house isn't going to be here long, that's really like the biggest one.
Yeah. I remember one time I talked people out of buying. It was like a $2.5 million house in Ballard overlooking the bay and stuff, kind of above like Golden Gardens, that area.
Oh, yeah.
And the train tracks are kind of down below, and like the hills kind of doing this, and there's spots where like the ground is clearly like breaking, and I'm like, and then that corner of the house was also sinking, and I'm like, and everything else about the house was gorgeous, and it fit everything they wanted. And I was like, this is a little bit of a concern. And they were like, oh yeah, we never even noticed that. And this was before we even got an inspection. And they were like, yeah. And now we start looking more in depth, and they're like, yeah, we're done. We're not doing this.
I mean, in some of those, especially when you get onto hillsides where you're like, where there's a will, where there's money, there's a way.
Yeah, totally. You can fix it, but it could be a hell of a lot of money.
When you get into those slopes, like they don't let you just do whatever you want sometimes. It's not, I want to build a fortress around the front of my house. They're like, sorry, it's protected habitat.
Exactly.
Your house is, it's doomed.
Yeah. You can't do much sometimes. Yeah. But there's not any like immediate, if you found a crack in the foundation, is that a deal breaker? Because some people see that and they're like, oh, this house is going to fall over.
I mean, it depends on the crack. You see cracks in foundations all the time.
Almost every house has a crack in it, probably.
Yeah. Another conversation that I have to kind of, just inform people, like, this is normal concrete cracks. It has to be, we have our little limits where it's like over a 1/4 inch, or if it's horizontal. There's different ways to analyze different cracks, but overall, most concrete foundations are going to have a little crack. It just depends on the severity. And then if you see other stuff, it's like coupled. You're like, oh, it's cracked here and cracked here. And then I went inside and I noticed like the windows wouldn't open and the walls, the floor is sloping. You're like, okay, there's a little bit bigger issue than just a small crack in a foundation.
And then from there it goes, well, is this a one-time the house settled because it's 100 years old, or is this an ongoing issue? And that's something that you can't always tell during an inspection because you're just taking a snapshot in time.
It's a 2 to 3 hour snapshot of it on this particular day and these weather conditions. And a lot of times, with the older houses, excuse me, a lot of them have settled. And there will be sloped floors.
Totally.
And people will get concerned about it. And then you just have to kind of look at everything in the house. I think the biggest thing about a home inspection is trying to like take the whole thing into one big picture, because it is one big functioning system that works together to kind of protect itself. And a little bit of settling is natural in a house that's 100 years old and been through 6 major earthquakes already. So
yeah, exactly.
It's not always a major concern if the floor is a little sloped.
Yep. Doesn't mean impending doom.
Impending doom.
How do buyers understand, and do you help buyers understand the potential estimate of repairs that are found during the inspection? Like, do you give them a general idea? Obviously, you're not the one doing the work or anything like that, but do you help people understand, hey, is this a $500 fix or a $5,000 fix?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Whether it's a $500 fix or if it's a handyman type thing or a talented uncle, or if it's, hey, you need a licensed electrician to do this. I do my best to ballpark some figures. Some I know. Unfortunately, I'm not in the trades anymore, and I'm not bidding jobs. And after the pandemic, things got substantially more expensive.
Exactly.
So it's gotten a little crazier to try and do guesstimates, but
you can give people like a general idea.
Absolutely. We can get you in the wheelhouse, and if it's $5,000 or $50,000.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what people need. And if we need to go further, like for example, going back to the different types of inspections, if you have your inspection contingency included with your offer, you can actually extend your inspection period to allow yourself to get additional inspections. So if you need to get an electrician out, a foundation specialist out, a roofer out, whatever it is, to look into something a little more in depth, and it extends your inspection period's about to end, you can extend it by a few days to get them out there, which is really nice.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to have built in there, because otherwise it's hard to fit just a home inspection in 3 to 5 days, and then to try and be like, we need an electrician and a foundation specialist out here in the next 3 to 5 days as well. It can get cumbersome.
Yeah. All right. the fun question. I've been waiting this whole. I teased it at the beginning.
Yeah.
What is the most surprising or outlandish thing you've ever seen in a house during an inspection?
You know, you sent me some of these questions, and that was a tough one to kind of think of because we do see a lot of weird stuff as inspectors.
Yes.
Some of which might just be weird to us because we're inspectors. But I think my personal favorite that popped into my head was a guy had a gun range in his crawl space. So he had.
And where was this?
I think it was Kirkland or Juanita.
Because I immediately go like outskirts, like
no, this wasn't like Snohomish County in the woods. This was in an urban, like a suburban,
like Juanita or something.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Houses all on every side, and he had there was like one basement room, and then he had what we call like a conditioned crawl space. So it's acts just like a mini basement, and it was maybe 50 feet long, and at the end of it was his furnace and then his water heater on either side, and there was this like 4-foot swath that he put a little pulley system with a little metal target on, and was just firing rounds downrange between the gas water heater and the gas furnace.
Oh my God.
I think there was 3 or 4 like bullets actually stuck in the foundation, and then a bunch of chips and stuff. And I was just admirable of his bravery to shoot between 2 gas appliances like that in his own house. I feel like he fancied himself like a true marksman. It's like, I'm not gonna miss. Yeah, that was the first one that popped into my head.
That's
as far
crazy.
As like,
yeah,
that's wild. But that said, there was some chipping in the foundation, but it was still
good.
You can shoot them with guns. It was still structurally sound.
Good to know.
Concrete strong.
That is funny. I know we've talked about a lot. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to make sure that people know about home inspections?
I think, this won't go over well because buying a house is a stressful, intense situation. Something I really feel like an inspector can do and should do is try and help alleviate some of that stress.
Totally.
Yeah. It doesn't stress me out, but it kind of stresses me out how stressed people are about the inspection because they're feel
scared.
Like
they don't know what they're buying, and they want to make sure they understand it and they're not buying like a money pit.
They really get nervous about the inspection. I think it's important for them to understand, like, we're on your side. Like,
yeah, totally.
We're here to work for you, the client. We don't work for agents. We don't work for brokers. We work for the person buying or selling the house to get the information they need. And I really hope, even when it's bad news, it's the best news you can get is to know like the exact condition of a home.
Yeah.
So sometimes it might crush your dream of owning that beautiful home that you love so much because it's falling off a hillside.
Yeah.
But it's better to know that than to buy the home and then
find that out.
Fall off the hillside with your nice house.
Exactly.
I think, just know that we're kind of on the client side and just trying to help.
Let's give people a better idea on pricing for home inspections. So is there a difference between the cost of a verbal like pre-inspection consultation versus like a written report?
Absolutely. So verbals, because we're not documenting everything and they go a little bit quicker, are a fair amount cheaper. For me, a verbal's $325 for an average size. It's for most homes, honestly, unless it gets really big. And then the writtens, they start at $450. I'm not the cheapest guy in town. You can find people that do them for $300. You can do them for $600 for the same size.
$300
house.
is the cheapest I've ever heard for an inspection.
Yeah, I don't recommend the $300 inspection.
I don't think I would either.
Like, I know what it takes to do these things. Yeah. And anybody that's willing to do it for $300
that's crazy.
I don't know if they're doing the best job, but they're out there doing it.
Get what you pay for.
Yeah, and it just, every inspector prices differently.
Yep.
I have my prices based on what I feel my skill set is. And then really the only other difference in pricing comes down to square footage in the home. Yep. So it's essentially you start at $450, and then it goes up every 500 square feet to a certain degree. If all of a sudden you have a 25-bedroom mansion, give a phone call. We'll figure out what it's going to cost. But it's just a flat fee. You get the same service, so it's and then the verbals are just a little bit cheaper, I guess.
Yeah, which makes sense because you're not taking photos, you're not writing a report, you're not sending that over, you're not doing all that stuff. Totally makes sense. All right, well, that's all I got for this episode of the Awesome in Seattle podcast. Brennan, thank you so much. I will put all of your contact info in the show notes. Do you want to at least give people maybe your website or phone number or what the best way is to contact you if they want to hire you?
Probably the easiest way to get all of that information at once would go to the website. It's workhorseinspections.com. I have an Instagram, Workhorse Inspections.
Cool.
And then phone number and all the contact info is all up there. It's on Google. It's anywhere that you
Google them.
Yep, look for information.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Awesome in Seattle podcast. All you buyers, reach out to them if you are interested in getting a home inspection. If you are thinking of wanting to go through this home buying process and you haven't taken that first step yet, you can always come to our free beers and home buying class. Brendan actually came last night.
That's good. I went last night. I need information that he knows that I don't know. And it was super informative and a really fun time. Yeah. Very casual.
Super laid back. There's no pressure. Free beer.
It wasn't like a sales pitch.
No.
It was just, here's some information, enjoy a beer, and talk to other people that are interested in buying homes. So.
Yeah, they're like an hour, and then when people ask a ton of questions, they go a little bit longer. But last night, I asked a lot of questions, and it went about an hour and a half. But it's about an hour-ish.
That's not a lot of time to just get your bearings on home buying.
So if you want to go to one of those, just go to the website beersandhomebuying.com. That's beersandhomebuying.com. And if you're ready to chat with us, if you've already come to one of those classes and you've been listening to the podcast for a while and you're ready to chat, the next step is super easy. You can schedule a strategy session right on our website, awesomenossum.com/schedule. Those are totally free. It doesn't mean you have to buy a house or anything like that. It's just chatting with you so you can understand what your options are. That's it. We'll see you in 2 more weeks here on the Awesome in Seattle podcast. See ya.
I had a great time. Thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome.